All right, I want to say first, I apologize for not having my camera leveled. I was just swinging around. This was from the same day as my last video I just put out. Um, but there's three islands north of me that I've filmed many times, and there's. I mean, I've been out there up on top of the little observation deck, and that observation deck isn't too high unless there's an extremely low tide. But I've been up there on a low tide um, and was never able to see land. This land right here that you're looking at, never was able to see this land. Obviously, there's land back there. And I know that there's land back there because this actually is my old fishing ground. I did a lot of fishing up in um, Chassahowiska, Fish Creek area. Yeah, we call it up Fish Creek without a paddle. There's a few islands up there, Sheephead Island, and then there's some islands further north up towards the Chassahowiska Channel, where it lets out into the Gulf. It's a big winding channel that does come out, but it's um, I'm not sure exactly how many miles it is, but it's no short distance. Also, too, as I went inland, I started noticing this what looked like smoke. No, it's not smoke. It's just a distortion. It's almost like these islands want to start doing a fata morgana, um, which in turn, what it does is it inverts the islands upside down above the islands that are visible. Um, and what hides these? There's several things that hides them. Mostly, I say it's when we get this mirroring and the heavy haze. When you get a heavy haze or a lot of humidity in the air, it actually creates like a curtain. Now, see that channel marker? That's up there in Chassahowiska. Um, again, I fish up that way. I take my boat and I have to go out and around, and it takes me about 45 minutes to an hour. And I'm usually wide open going up there. But again, I got to take into consideration I have to go out, around, and then back in. But obviously, you can see these trees here where, like I say, on most days when my visibility sucks, I cannot see these trees. And I've always told myself one day I'm going to have really great visibility, and I'm going to be able to show people that there is land beyond these three islands. And this is one of the islands. I think I went past one already while I was jibber jabbering. Um, but you can see how this opens up into a bay back there, and that's why it seems to the land gets even smaller because it's like a big bay. Again, when you're looking up in a bay, there's more water, so you're looking across more water. And then, of course, because of perspective, things get smaller. So this land is really, really small, but it's also a long ways out. And again, um, I think I was telling Buzz Dev that there's land there, and I showed a video before. I think I put it out, and I told people that there was land there, and they probably thought I was crazy. Um, but because I fish these areas, I obviously know. Um, depending on my camera height too, this looming, which I know occurs because of the size of these towers on the Crystal River power plant. Sometimes when I zoom in on them, man, they look big, fat, and they shouldn't look that big and fat. Not from 27 miles away. So I see how they are looming and they're being pulled forward. And there's the three islands that I usually am filming. And sometimes, like I said, even those three islands are not visible from up on top of that um, observation deck. And I gotta apologize right here too for my focus. I got out of focus. The way the light was hitting my screen from behind. You see how the sun's behind me more. Um, it's lighting up my screen, and I really couldn't tell if I was had a really good focus, which I don't. I lost some of my focus, especially for further back. I mean, the birds look like lights lighting up. But there's another Chassahowiska um, channel marker. Excuse me. About choking here. Because this footage really excites me. Because I've been waiting for this moment and waiting and waiting and waiting, and I finally get it. I not only know or think that Earth is flat, I know Earth is flat, and I understand perspective absolutely 100%. Just turn around and look as you're driving away from land in a boat, and the land gets smaller and smaller until you can no longer resolve it. It's not going over a curve. It just gets so small to where you can't resolve it. You know, look, put a fly or a bug on the wall and keep walking away and keep looking back, and eventually you'll still see your wall, but you won't see that bug. Why? Because the bug got too small that you couldn't see it. Now, I do gotta say, I do see some looming going on, but it's much further back there. That's why I say 100% of visibility, these islands would be uh, more visible, but probably not as big. If you understand what I mean by lensing, lensing is making it bigger, so it's pulling it in a little bit. But everything closer to me is not getting um, really pulled in as much as what's being farther away. It's hard to explain, but I see it in a lot of my videos when I'm reviewing them, and it's very telling. Again, when you start doing these long observations and really start going back and looking at what you filmed and then comparing it to what you filmed on different days, wow, I mean, some of it just blows my mind. Like I said, that halfway rack that I filmed at Bayport, I've seen it start mirroring before that thing, which, it starts mirroring at a mile and a half away, 2 miles, and everything beyond it just vanishes. Okay, and now here's the towers. And one of the reasons why I see how big it is because the one night that I had really, really good visibility and I was taking pictures of this, I was on a different angle. So I don't think I had all the trees in my way or as much of the trees, but the trees were shorter, smaller, because they were at the right perspective height. They weren't getting lens. So I was able to see well over. Matter of fact, this particular night or this particular day when it did get dark, I did take some pictures of it at a low perspective and at a high perspective. Um, and the pictures weren't as good, mainly because there was more distortion. And that's something too. People say, oh, you're filming a mirage. Well, really, what is a mirage, right? A mirage it isn't what you think it is. Just because it's distorted doesn't mean it's not there. Okay? I mean, look, the only thing that's out there is a boat. That's distorted boat. You can see its light flashing. Some of them, as they're moving, you can see their wake moving. And then you have the scientific people say, well, it's refraction. Well, if refraction has that much power to pull this much land up, um, and I'll explain to you here on right here on the Bayport rack. Normally, even at a low perspective or even at a high perspective, the water seems to end below this rack. Now I'm at full zoom, and I mean, I've had good days of visibility where this thing was in my face. It was twice its size. Um, so I know that it's looming, and when it's looming, again, it pulls everything in, and it not only compresses um, some of the further objects, but it actually, well, you see the further objects, but they're compressed because it compresses the whole horizon. It pulls it down to where you cannot see it at eye level. I actually think that there's a little bit more water um, beyond this point because there's always just above the water some mirroring effect. Also, you got to see that or take into consideration that that edge that you see the water at, there is a lot of light reflecting upward. Okay, because light don't reflect down. How can it reflect down in the water? Yeah, the water absorbs it, but it reflects up off of any mirrored surface, bright surface. So this water is being reflected up, especially on angles. The way light hits the water, it actually bounce off the water. And that's what I think lights up the bottom of our clouds when the sun has supposedly have gone over the curvature. So the reason why a lot of people are mistaken where eye level is because they've really never tested it. Best thing to do is use your virtual horizon and a level. And there's a little bit of a discrepancy in it. That's why I say that I think the water's a little bit higher. But again, I will agree that it could be a little bit lower because of that reflecting light off the water. But let's say it's at just at the top of that rack, okay, where the wood is, not the light, or where the birds are sitting up on the light. If on days where the water is down just below it, all of that is missing behind it. Now there's miles and miles of water back there that you cannot see. Now my tripod is in the water pretty much. I showed it on the last video where my camera height was. I'm at 5 feet standing there. Give or take a few more inches. Like this boat right here is probably 2-3 miles behind that rack. But the rack is 3.5 miles away from me as it is. Science says I can only see 3 miles to the horizon at 6 feet. Well, I'm only at 5 feet. So really, the water should stop at the bottom of that rack and I should not see water beyond it. But what do you know? I've not only got water beyond it, I got boats that are going beyond it that you can see perfectly in the water. And I got other bird racks beyond it that you can see perfectly in the water. The farthest one is 11.05 miles. And you can see it in the water. Yes, it is distorted. It may even look bigger than what it should because I think prospectively it should look like a little skinny, tiny little square out there. More than this blobby, goobily, you know, it's like it's in a heat wave. Okay, so it's just getting all distorted, and when things get distorted, it doesn't mean that it is a mirage because then you would have to say this whole bird rack is a mirage. Well, I know it's not a mirage because I can drive right out to it. I know where this bird rack is. I know where all the bird racks are. I've gone to them. I've looked at them. I do want to get out again one day and measure them. My GPS took a poop or I can't get power to it. So I got to work on trying to get that because it had all my waypoints, my routes, my fishing routes, my fishing holes. Everything was in that GPS. I got to try to get that thing going. And then I'm going to have to sit down with a notebook and take all the coordinates to all my fishing holes, all the racks. That way I, could have them for the future reference. But I can probably drive out and find all these racks just out of memory. Just knowing where they're at from Bayport Rack, I can drive pretty much to any of them. All right, well, again, I wanted to show this. This last part I didn't have to show, but I wanted to show that that land was there. It's not a mirage. You are seeing land, and there's no way I should see land at that distance at my height.